advantages of being incorporated. The biggest advantage that's most frequently touted by lawyers and accountants who want you to form a corporation right at the start of your startup business is that you are protected to a certain degree from the liability of the creditors of the corporation. So you can invest your money in the business, you can start up the business, and if the business fails and you cannot pay your bills, they can sue to recover whatever's assets are in the corporation, but they can't sue through the corporation to the shareholders, the people that own the company. They're protected from liability. Well, that's true, and that's a huge advantage of being incorporated, protection from liability. But you will find that if you are a small startup company, you don't really have that much protection from liability, because if you need to borrow money to start your business and you go down to the bank, and usually the bank won't loan you any money as a startup anyway because it's too risky, but if for some reason you have really good credit or you have a good track record of success with your other businesses and the bank would loan you some money, you say, fine, loan it to Acme Corporation, my corporation. And the bank will say, sure, we'll loan it to Acme, but only if you as an individual sign a personal guarantee of that debt. So if Acme Corporation fails and we don't get paid back by them, we have the legal right to come and sue you individually for the unpaid debt of Acme. So if you signed a personal guarantee to get a loan at the bank, does being incorporated give you any protection from liability from that loan? No, it gives you none. Further, if you go to your suppliers and you say, I want to buy the bread, the flour, and the baking supplies for my bakery on credit, and the supplier may say, fine, we'll sell you on credit, 90 days, same as cash, but if you want the credit extended to your bakery corporation, we'll do that, but only if you sign a personal guarantee of the debt for the supplies. So if you signed a personal guarantee for the debt for the supplies, does it do you any good to be incorporated to protect you from liability? Nope. Okay, you're in the bakery and you're baking, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning when you bake the donuts so they're ready to sell to people that go to work at 6 o'clock. You're half asleep, and one morning when you're reaching up on the shelf to grab the yeast to put into the dough for the donuts, instead you accidentally grab the rat poison, and you put that in the donuts, and a bunch of people get poisoned. Negligence or strict products liability. In either event, though, are they just going to sue Acme Bakery, or are they also going to sue the man who was standing there that was negligent and shook the rat poison into the flour? They're probably going to sue both people, both the company and you personally. So does being incorporated give you any protection? No. So as a small startup company, you may find that the several $1,000s you might spend on a lawyer to incorporate might not be giving you that much protection, and you may want to start out with some less expensive form of business ownership and incorporate later as you grow, when your accountant tells you, hey, there's now tax reasons why you need to be incorporated. Of course, if the nature of your business is high risk and you think that being incorporated right from the start would give you some meaningful degree of protection from liability, then go ahead and incorporate right from the start. But back to advantages of being incorporated. Number one is protection from liability. Number two is kind of strange and interesting. It's prestige. Now, I know this may not sound logical to you, but a lot of stuff that happens in the business world, believe it or not, is not hard and fast facts and numbers, it's emotions. And if you go into a bank looking for a loan, or you go to a supplier looking to buy a product on credit, and you go in and you say, I'm John Smith, the baker, you're going to get treated a little bit differently than if you go in there and you say, I'm Acme Bakery Corporation. It's just a fact of life. Corporations get treated a little better. You have a little more prestige. You have a slight business advantage just from the prestige of being incorporated. Part of that has to do with the fact that statistically, around 80% of all of the income generated by businesses in the whole United States is generated by corporations. and the rest of all the small businesses, they generate the other 20%. So, there's some justification to giving corporations a little bit more attention than individual business owners. And the third advantage of being incorporated is simply tax advantages. Once the business gets large enough, the fact that the income gets taxed twice gets outweighed by other tax planning things you can do, and you can save money on taxes by being incorporated. So those are the advantages of being incorporated. What about the disadvantages of being incorporated? Well, first of all, that income gets taxed twice, and that hurts when you're a small startup business. Secondly, although you have some degree of protection from liability, as I explained, in small startup companies, that protection's not that great. Third, corporations are somewhat expensive to set up. You might spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 in attorney's fees starting up a corporation, and at the time when you're just starting the business, you're usually strapped for cash, and that's no small expense. Also, there are relatively high annual maintenance fees to maintain a corporation. It's a minimum in California of $800 a year to maintain your corporate charter with the state of California. Now, 40 years ago, when I first started practicing law, around 1980, it was $40. And in those days, we had entrepreneurs in California that would form and keep on the shelf 3 or 4 or 5 what they call shelf corporations, so that when they had a new business opportunity come up, boom, they already had a corporate structure they could grab and use to start their new business and create jobs and booming economy in California. Well, nobody does that anymore, not in California, because you form a corporation, it costs you a minimum of $800 in the state fees just to get it chartered, and a minimum of $800 a year after that for the annual fees to maintain the charter. One more rather obvious and blatant example of California being the number one most business unfriendly state in the union, and the reason why you may have a hard time finding a good job in California. Now, another disadvantage of being a corporation is that if you are an officer or director of the corporation, you owe a fiduciary duty to all of your shareholders. Not only do you owe them the highest possible duty of loyalty and care, so that you must make every decision based on what's in their best interest, even if it's not in your best interest, but every decision that you make is subject to review by a board of directors and by your shareholders, and so you're no longer as completely in charge or nearly as free to make creative decisions as you were as a sole proprietor. You have to answer to officers and directors. And of course, as an officer or a director, if you breach your fiduciary duty to the shareholders, you may have substantial liability. So those are disadvantages of corporate ownership.